Hello and welcome to our next episode of the VCF Roundtable. Today it is episode number 22. We're talking about the VCF product packaging.
But you're starting with a joke. Toby, it's called VCD Roundtable, not VCF
Oh, yeah, it
Roundtable.
is the VCD Roundtable. Yeah, that's absolutely right. It is the VCD Roundtable. And today we are in an absolute elite round because with me is...
Yeah, hello, this is Matthias. VCD Roundtable, talking about VCF product and packaging.
Yeah,
Or we have the VCF Roundtable, talking about VCD product and packaging, whatever.
Whatever. Okay, so Matthias, in our last episode, we have already started to talk about the product packaging, what is included in VCF from a service provider perspective. And today we would like to talk about the additional products or the additional topics which are there. So let's have a look what we have in the product packaging.
Exactly. So last episode, we talked about SDDC Manager, vSphere, vSend, and NSX. And we said next episode is going to cover the Aria Suite, which is part of VCF. And being more precisely, it's the Aria Suite Enterprise Edition. So we have Aria Operations for Network, and then we have the Aria Suite with Operations Manager, Operations for Log, Automation Orchestrator, and of course the Lifecycle Manager. So we're not talking about Aria for networks because that's a different ball game. Because what the product is able to deliver and what it's meant to be used for. So we could make a dedicated episode out of it. But first and foremost, what is about the Aria Suite? So it is part of the VCF product package, even for service providers. So we could start complaining about, what are we going to do with it? I don't need it. I don't want to pay for it, whatever. It doesn't make any sense because it's part of VCF. And I think it adds a ton of value. We just need to figure out how can we gain the value out of the additional product suite and how can we as service providers provide additional services for our tenants. So for example, let's start with Aria Operations for Log. So first and foremost, it's still important to say it still has no built-in multi-tenancy. We should be very, very clear with that one. So I would start with the service provider use case. In the end, as a service provider, I can use it and collect all the log files from my infrastructure and build queries on top of it, just enabling me to provide a better maintenance and operations and services for my infrastructure to support or to proactively support my tenants if something happens within the infrastructure. But on the other hand, Toby, so you're one of our VCF guys. So what about a dedicated workload domain, for instance?
Yeah, I was just about to mention this because what we still have also from a service provider perspective is to ramp up a dedicated isolated. And now we really need, as you mentioned before, we need to be precisely because there are two different options available related to an, let's call it still dedicated workload, the workload domain. There is the dedicated workload domain within my VCF stack, so which is in the same single sign-on domain, and there is the isolated workload domain. And only from my understanding as today, I'm only capable of having a dedicated Aria operations stack or Aria stack in an isolated environment. In a shared environment or in a normal VCF VI domain environment, I only can use a single instance. But let's see what Broadcom is doing here and how the stuff is changing in the future.
So you're saying the difference between an isolated and just the workload domain in VCF is kind of enhanced linked mode or isolated SSO domain of the VCF.
SSO domain. Yeah.
Just to get me in sync.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's one, but still it is one option. And to be honest, we have discussed this already in the last couple of meetings and in the last couple of weeks. Still, yes, there are some automated deployments in my whole VCF stack. But no one says you are still not allowed to deploy it manually. So also this is still an option or still an additional part to say, okay, I cannot utilize the whole automated deployment as today, but still I can deploy an additional, let's say on Aria operations for log instance for a dedicated customer. So this is possible. And this is a working example, or is would be a working solution. But let's see how the roadmap is developing there and what we have in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the dedicated instance for a tenant, I think we need to be careful because I foresee the use cases which it can be used for, but it can't be used for the underlying infrastructure because a vCenter has one syslog collector, same for an ESXi host, and same for NSX. Let's think about, for example, a DFW or DH transport nodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if a customer would prefer having a managed kind of syslog collector instance to reconfigure his guest OSs, for example, to collect the log files. Of course, I know there is a ton of stuff to configure in Aria operations for logs because of agents and whatever, but let's move the whole configuration aside. It's just about the use case. So the customer is able to log his OS logs and maybe application logs into the operations for log instance. The only question we always need to be aware of is how about licensing?
Absolutely.
We can't answer that today, I think, because the VCF part contains the whole infrastructure layer in terms of vCenter and all the VMware by Broadcom product stack. I have no idea. As far as I'm aware of, as long as the guest OS runs on the same virtual infrastructure, I think it's okay.
To be honest, also from my side, not really a clear answer, but what I have read in the whole new licenses documents and papers, what are already available, not that much content, but the first documents are already available, is yes, you are absolutely right. As long as you have your OS instance, your guest application running on the VCF license, or on the VCF license stack.
Yeah, and the virtual machine needs to run on those ESXi hosts.
On those ESXi hosts, you don't need to have additional licenses, which is in general, to be honest, so as far as we have it understood right now, a total different approach than VMware was going in the past. But let's see what in the long run really the solution would be.
Yeah. But again, the licensing assumptions we're coming up with is just as we understand. So that does not mean that the licensing is done like this. That's just how we understand.
www.broadcom.com.
Yeah. What's important, if you have maybe a dedicated and isolated workload domain with a service provider and have your own infrastructure on-prem, and you want to have log, or you want to have sent all the logs for on-premises and cloud to the same centralized ops for log dedicated instance. So that would be an example. I have no idea how this works from a licensing perspective, because you have the virtual machines running in the cloud on the VCF license stack. The virtual machines, so that's more complex.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another one, but we have provided a dedicated video around the whole NSX and projects stuff, so projects within NSX. So Aria Operations for Log, together with NSX projects, enables multi-tenant logging view for networking services. But
Networking
again,
and firewalling.
And firewalling, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, we have a video created dedicated on this topic. So NSX projects, advantages, disadvantages about that configuration. That's Aria Operations for Log. Which one is next? Ooh.
Our world famous Aria Operations Manager. Also, for that, to be honest, we had one session with our Belgium phenomenal Alan Greenit about Operations Manager. So if you are really interested in the Operations Manager stuff, have a look in the past episodes. But today we are talking about what is there from a VCD and VCF perspective.
Yeah, it's again a use case discussion, right? We're aware the Ops Manager is an enterprise monitoring tool, but what can we do with it? So I think we have two different kinds of use cases. We have the service provider use case and the tenant use case. For the service provider, it's still the same. So we have it because of the core-based licensing. It's there. In the past, as I understood licensing VCP in the past, the service provider was allowed to use it to monitor to use it as a monitoring tool of the infrastructure for his own purposes, for capacity planning and SLA monitoring and all that kind of stuff. But he was not allowed to provide access to the tenants from a licensing perspective, only licensing.
Right. Yeah.
So the service provider use case is basically speaking the same as before. And again, it gets more interesting nowadays because that's the first bullet, because of the core-based licensing. In the past, we had the VRAM-based licensing, so we had enough hosts powered on, install, ready to run, and the license fee was paid based on consumed VRAM. Nowadays, we are paying based on up and running cores. So it might make sense to use Ops Manager to optimize the infrastructure to have less servers running, so to save some money on licensing. It's just an idea. I know we have the difference between committed cores and on demand and all that kind of stuff, but it gets more interesting to optimize the infrastructure usage to save a bit on the licensing cost. And of course,
right sizing.
Yeah.
What we mentioned already in one of the past episodes, with the new licensing model, right sizing becomes more and more interesting, and there I can clearly say that the Operations Manager will heavily support you as a service provider, and also maybe your tenants to right size your infrastructure.
Yeah, to increase demand. That's what tenants should do, right?
To increase demands. Yeah, absolutely.
Consumption. But it's the second use case, because in the past, I know only a very few tenants willing to pay the extra amount of money to have access to Operations Manager, because most of the tenants didn't get the advantages of this enterprise monitoring tool. But with the new VCF stack, licensing is done, right? So there is no additional cost to have Operations Manager accessible by the tenants. So from my point of view, as a service provider, you can just develop use cases for the tenants, create ready-to-run dashboards, which can be used by your tenants, enabling them, as Toby mentioned, maybe some right sizing or increased demand dashboards, whatever, and provide access to a tool which you're already paying for. And from our perspective, just being honest, it's not if service providers are going to use it and add value for their customers. It's just a matter of time. Because as Eve already mentioned, I think in more or less every single video, we now have a plain battlefield. Every service provider licenses the VCF stack. Every service provider has access to the same products. So the question is, how can we get the most out of it? How can we provide the best value for our tenants?
Yeah. As you just meant, because I was just about to mention it, the most important question is, how quickly is a service provider, from my perspective, to be honest, is how quickly is a service provider now capable to provide the new additional services because they are there. And as always, the last one gets bitten by the dogs.
Yeah, true. And these two products, like Aria Operations Manager and Operations for Logs, being really honest, they provide basic infrastructure monitoring and data, which I should be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
What's next on the list?
Also helping you figuring out root cause stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So the next one is our Aria Orchestrator. Matthias, would you like to talk about it?
My most beloved product. No, so Aria Orchestrator, it's a workflow engine, right? It's there since decades. But first and foremost, I would still like to mention, same for Aria Orchestrator, it's not a multi-tenant product. So it's not meant that a service provider gives access to a tenant directly to the orchestrator. Even installing a dedicated orchestrator instance for a customer might cause issues. It really depends. I think if you have an isolated workload domain, you could do it somehow, but I would not prefer that option. Mm. What's it doing? It connects to external system. It's just a huge API. It runs workflows, collects data, updates external systems, whatever. I still see the orchestrator as a centralized tool to enable even more self-service services for tenants to configure or access as service provider hosted systems. I think a very simple example, if a service provider hosts a Microsoft Active Directory providing usernames and logons for tenants, it could provide a self-service like, reset password, because you're not enabling access to the central Active Directory for anyone else. The only very important thing with Orchestrator is, please, if you build services around it, never ever provide direct access, because Orchestrator has administrative access into so many systems. It's very dangerous. So please expose Orchestrator only via the Content Hub in VCD, because VCD solves the whole multi-tenant issues or challenges we have around Orchestrator. So that's just, please do not provide direct access.
I would say not only we have within Orchestrator, I would say also we have inside vCenter and many other products.
Yes, sir. You're perfectly right. But Aria Automation.
Aria Automations. We discussed it already yesterday, and maybe some SPs will think about the same. Okay, we are now in the phase that VCF out of the box provides already the capability of deploying and consuming Aria Automation, which is supposed to be a cloud service portal. But on the other hand, we are talking about Cloud Director. We are in the vCloud Director or the Cloud Director Roundtable and not in the VCF Roundtable. So what should we do with Aria Automation? And yesterday we discussed it already. We figured out, one option could be, if still the same use case we had already in the Aria Operations for Log, if you have a customer inside your data center, inside your service provider environment, saying, but I would like to have a dedicated, isolated workload domain. And I don't need Cloud Director for whatever kind of reason, but maybe he would like to have still self-service, then he can utilize here Aria Automation. Bless you. So this is one use case. And the second use case we figured out, or we provided, it was already there in version 7, and it is now available again in version 8. Aria Automation has an endpoint for Cloud Director. So we can utilize Aria Automation more or less in front of my Cloud Director to provide services inside the VCD environment. So also there, if I have a customer or if I have a tenant saying I have a dedicated VI, or the dedicated workload domain, but also still consuming some additional services from a shared environment, then I can use here also Aria Automation to provide self-service against all of my endpoints. So this is the use case we have. We can imagine him at the moment. Also here, let's see what the future is really bringing, I would say.
Exactly. So, and that's the nature of Aria Automation. Just saying, I build a cloud template and I just deploy the same cloud template against different infrastructures. And that could be either the vSphere-based dedicated isolated workload domain, which I use to host production workloads on. And on the second, I can have the VCD endpoint from my CSP and deploy my test instances against using the same cloud template, for example. So that would be a use case for Aria Automation. But again, very important, Aria Automation itself, or by its nature, and now I'm opening that hole, that wormhole. It's not fully multi-tenant.
Ooh, the box of Pandora is now open.
Yeah, no, I don't want. We don't want to start a discussion on that. So it's still, as far as we understand, the preferred option. If you have multiple different tenants, please have a dedicated Aria Automation instance per tenant, and that brings the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager into the game, because if we start saying have a dedicated Aria Automation for tenant A and tenant B, and how shall I manage all those different infrastructures?
Yeah, and to be honest, it is also part of the whole Cloud Foundation story, because the SDDC manager, which is at the end, the SDDC manager is just triggering the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to deploying my Workspace ONE access, so the identity manager part, deploying my Aria Automation, deploying my Aria Operations, and so on. So at the end, there is already the whole integration between the SDDC manager and the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. And the SDDC manager is just calling the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager and says, hey, can you please deploy Workspace ONE access, so the IDM portion? Can you please deploy Operations Manager? Can you please deploy log? Can you please deploy whatever you would like to have? So also here for all products in the whole Aria Suite, there is already some integration between VCF and the Aria Suite. Not fully, to be honest. So some of the Aria products are not there to be automatically deployed from a VCF perspective. Then I still need to go to my Lifecycle Manager, but can start a manual deployment, as you mentioned already, to have the infrastructure overall utilized and also in a self-deployment engine. Yeah. With that being said,
so what's the conclusion out of it before we move on with the announcements? The conclusion is we have two options. Option A is we complain about the price tag and that we're not using all those products. It's an option, but not a good one, I think. So option B, come up with proper use cases and build use cases around those products, and there are many. What we prefer or what we suggest is build a ready-to-run product around that use case. So make it consumable. If you approach a customer saying, right, dear Mr. Customer, you want to have operations manager and monitor infrastructure, customer like, yeah. So how does it work? How can it consume? Blah, 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 blah. And then if you confront the customer with Aria Operations Manager and that guy has never seen that product before, he might be overwhelmed by the amount of data presented and all that kind of stuff. So have a ready-to-run product, like some dashboards you come up with, and maybe some additional super metrics, whatever is cool within the product, and have a package with a certain flow and the data sheet and a basic guide or operations manual to present to the customer, and then add some managed service on top and then sell it. That makes perfect sense. So that's what we suggest to do. And the same for Aria Operations for log and Aria Automation and that kind of stuff. So that's what we suggest to do. So Toby already showed the last slide we have for today, which is about announcements.
Let me quickly something add. But to be honest, now I maybe open a little bit of a deprecated information. Is Cassandra still an option in VCD, or is it already gone? So the old matrix logging is already moved out.
It's still there. I think you could still use it. I'm not 100% sure, but being honest, it won't be the way going forward.
Yeah, but also for those service providers which are maybe utilizing it still, you have now a perfect option to get rid of it. Just bring in Aria Operations Manager and the tenant app and provide the same, or to be honest, much more capability to your tenant from time to time.
There was one nice feature with Cassandra, but we're not starting over there.
Yeah, a little bit of announcements.
So the next VCD Roundtable is planned to be released beginning of March. That's in a week and a half. With big news on the cloud provider program, which we hope will be released by then. So if it won't be released, we don't have any news, but yeah, we will see. So Eve and Sasha will be at the MSP CSP conference in Vegas, 11th until the 14th of March. So they're on site. If you want to meet those guys, just reach out. More than happy to help scheduling a meeting if you need something. And in March, there's also the CloudFest Europe in Rust. That's the south and west part of Germany, so close to the Swiss border. That's the next conference attendances we have on the schedule. And with the with the next VCD Roundtable beginning of March, we might also release or announce already our planned attendances within April.
Yes, so the plan. And one last announcement, because Eve and I finally decided the name. There will be a new podcast live stream stuff available in a couple of weeks. So Eve and I decided to do the same like we have done for the VCD Roundtable. We will do it with VCF. Now we are talking about VCF, but more in a really hands-on scenario. So we will start a Twitch series, really of what is the deployment Excel, what is the cloud builder appliance, how to ramp up a VCF stack really from zero. So this will be also available in a couple of weeks.
That sounds awesome. I'll attend. I have a ton of questions.
And it will run under the world famous name of VCF Musketeers.
Oh my gosh. Nice. I do something with naked cats.
Yeah, to be sure.
All right.
All
With
right.
that being said, thanks everyone for attending. No questions as far as I'm aware of.
Nope.
Best of luck. Have fun coming up with a ton of products and ideas how to leverage all the products being part of the VCF stack. And see you at the next VCD Roundtable. Have a
In
great
March.
day. Take
Have a
care,
great day.
everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.